Volunteers form underground railroad to house migrants dumped by ICE. By Marta Vizquez's count, since Christmas she's welcomed 306 newly arrived Central American parents and their children to spend the night at her house in Glendale, a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona. The families had all spent days in federal custody after presenting themselves at the southern border, and had nowhere to spend the night after immigration officials released them in Phoenix. They did not have, but over the last 3 months, Immigration and Customs Enforcement HSA reported 107,000 parents and children in Texas, Arizona and California. Shelters, on a couple urgent occasions, Vizquez and her husband hosted more than 40 people in their home at once. "I cannot leave them on the street," said Vizquez, a 44-year-old Honduran immigrant and U.S. Army veteran. "I just can't." ICE's mass releases are a contrast to the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy last spring, in which the U.S. government sought to criminally prosecute parents for crossing the border and separated them from their children. As a result, immigration officials are quickly releasing families from federal custody, so quickly that some observers describe the process as chaotic. Volunteers some of the families are asylum seekers fleeing violence. According to ICE's office in Phoenix, they either endure long waits to present themselves at official border crossings between the U.S. and Mexico, or cross the border illegally and turn themselves into border patrol. Others turn attempts. All will face immigration court hearings and mandatory check-ins with ICE when they arrive at their destinations. Some parents the plight of these families feels personal to Vizquez. She fled violence. "I see myself in every single one of these immigrants," she said. And in each little bit, the text messages exchanged among the Phoenix Volunteer Network are constant. They coordinate. "We have 8 families who need a place to stay." "Drivers, we have an emergency situation and need immediate help." "If you are bilingual or have trusted friends who are, we are looking for help." ICE drops off up to 300 families per day in Phoenix, according to the agency. When there is room demand for volunteer aid has increased recently due to a combination of factors. More families are arriving at the U.S. border, shifts in ICE procedures on managing families, and a change in Greyhound policy aimed at barring stranded migrants from waiting inside its stations. It used to be routine for ICE to ensure immigrants released from its custody already had bus or plane tickets purchased, usually by relatives. But in October, that shift has greatly increased the labor of the volunteer network, said Michael Stancliffe, a volunteer who has been helping migrants and asylum seekers for the last 5 years with the Stancliffe said now families must often spend a couple nights in Phoenix as they reach out to relatives and friends who can arrange travel. They often stay. "It creates the perception of a crisis," Stancliffe said of ICE's highly visible mass drop-offs of families without onward travel arrangements. "It creates but ICE has said the change has to do with the higher volume of families crossing the border and the legal mandate to release families within 20 days. In February, Henry Lucero, field office director for ICE in Phoenix, said once his agency clears a family for release, we no longer have the legal authority to detain them. They are free to go. ICE cites the same reason for why it cannot consistently offer volunteer and community groups more notice before drop-offs. Recently, Greyhound announced ICE can no longer drop families off inside their bus stations, and families cannot enter without a ticket. In Phoenix, volunteers say this change has put pressure on them to quickly find a safe place for families, then transport the families to that location. Given the country's a local group known as AZ Patriots has been protesting the arriving families for months. In a video post, volunteers housing migrants keep the locations of where they shelter families secret to avoid protesters. Those who come to pick Jen asked to only use her first name, since she said people who oppose these families entering the country have sent her hateful messages and attempted to dox her by publicizing her personal information. This has been an underground effort, the whole thing. Everything is within. On a recent evening, volunteers transported 60 parents and kids who had been left at the bus station to an empty banquet hall. Other volunteers, All Hands AZ is calling on state and city officials to create a designated shelter for families coming out of ICE custody. San Diego County. Long term, I don't know how we will do this without greater support, Jen said. We just want the local. Lucero of ICE said he believes the number of families coming to the border will continue to climb unless Congress changes immigration laws so ICE can have the option of detaining families longer. A proposal immigrant rights advocates oppose. ICE is bound by a 1997 legal settlement in a case known as Flores, which says immigrant families with children cannot be detained longer than 20 days. A federal judge Lucero said the requirement to release families swiftly encourages more people to come with children to the border. That information is all over Central America, and that's what's driving this increase of these numbers that we haven't seen before in this area, Lucero said. The policy debate feels far away from 38-year-old Kate's Phoenix living room, where she has been hosting Central American families. She asked to only have spent a lot of time in Central America, and so many people throughout my travels have opened their doors to me, said Kate, who works in higher education. It really wanted. Two young Guatemalan girls who arrived with their mother decorated Kate's driveway with colorful chalk drawings of flowers and rainbows. After they boarded I am going to thank you guys who live here in the United States, you are good people to us, the father said in Spanish, his second language. You gave us food. Then he and his son departed on a bus for Florida, leaving vacant a spot for the next family.
Raindrop, drop top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.